talks about you, then you are nobody. Then you are nobody. Remember.
All is One Reflections. I am Priestess Oshun Funke, and today I am here to talk to you about something that a lot of people have been talking about today, and that is the murder of Charlie Kirk on stage. Okay. I'm going to be honest, I was not very familiar with this person. I had heard a couple of disparaging things that he said here and there, but definitely wasn't a fan and not a follower. But someone sent me the video of him being shot on stage, and I remember just being so shocked at how he was just about to make a crazy statement about gang violence, which I'm sure was laced with all kind of innuendo about Black people. And he lost his life. So I wanted to take a look at it because so many people are talking about it. We've even had people within the Black community come out and chastise folks for their indifference to the situation. I digress on that. But what I will do is tonight I'm going to do a reading, and I'm going to use several of my tools to find out what we need to know about this situation. I am also going to look at the astrology of the day. I'm going to look at his astrology, and we're going to find out what was going on energetically that allowed such a thing to happen. So in other words, this is going to be a metaphysical autopsy report. And we're going to go ahead and dive right in. For those of you who may not know who this person was, I'm going to play a few video clips. We have a collection of video clips, and we're going to look at those so we get a feel for who he is, and then we're going to ask the ancestors, what do we need to know about this occurrence? So let's just dive right in, and we're going to roll some of those clips right now.
Every single year, so that we can have the Second Amendment to protect our other God-given rights.
Counting or not counting gang violence? Great.
Really seriously. You had to go steal a white person's slot to go be taken somewhat seriously. Play cut 52.
But I rise today as a clear recipient of affirmative action, and particularly in higher education. I may have been admitted on affirmative action, both in terms of being a woman and a woman of color, but I can declare that I did not graduate on affirmative action. This is my personal story.
I hear because of action affirmative. She can't even say that. We know. It's very obvious to us that you were not smart enough to be able to get in on your own. I couldn't make it on my own, so I needed to take opportunities from someone more deserving. You know, this is how arrogant Joy Reid and Ketanji Brown Jackson and Michelle Obama and Sheila Jackson Lee are. They're so narcissistic, they think this is persuasive. They think we're like, oh, of course, that's why we need affirmative action, because you have impressed us with your brilliance. Of course. Imagine the world without Joy Reid. Imagine the world without Sheila Jackson Lee or Michelle Obama or Ketanji Brown Jackson. They think this is persuasive. They think as they kind of now reveal that I'm only here because of anti-white, anti-Asian forced discrimination policies. That turned me into a bitter. I think empathy is a made-up New Age term that does a lot of damage, but
she got raped. And she was going to give birth, and she would, no, wait, oh, and she was going to give birth, and she was going to live. Would you want her to go through that and carry her rapist baby?
That's awfully graphic.
It's no, but it's a real life scenario that happens to many people.
The answer is yes, the baby would be delivered.
Okay. Give me full screen, please. Okay. So we are about to do a reading. If you are not familiar with who this person is or was, there you have it. Not anybody that I would really enjoy knowing, but nevertheless, he was here. And we are now going to do a reading to find out what more do we need to know about this case. You know, there are people saying that this occurrence, there are all kinds of conspiracy theories that are floating around. So I'm not going to talk about them because I don't want to change the energy of the moment. I just want to let the bones fall where they may, and then I'm going to say what I see, okay? So the first question that I'm going to ask is simply, what do we need to know about this murder? What is it that our collective ancestors would like for us to know about the murder of Charlie Kirk? Okay. All right. My sound okay? All right. So, what do we need to know about the murder of Charlie Kirk? So, the mothers are the first thing that come through. And I have the feather, but it's upside down. So it's saying don't underestimate the mothers. And those of you who practice the way we practice, the Orisa Hoodoo doctrine, then you know what that's all about. Do not underestimate the mothers. So this is indicating that some offense was made to the mothers, right? That could be literal mothers, because we heard just now his stance on abortion law and trying to police women's bodies. But we also heard disparaging comments that he made about Black women who, against all odds, became educated and rose to positions of impact. So he offended the mothers, and it wasn't a small offense because it was not lightweight, as is being indicated here with the feather upside down. So over destiny, I have the quarters. So this is saying that his destiny was to have to repay. His destiny was payback. So this is talking about karma, in other words. This is saying that there was a karmic aspect to what happened. And I don't think that that's really a surprise, because we know, those of you who have followed him know, but we all have been exposed to comments that he's made recently about guns and access to guns, okay? And so we've all heard, live by the sword, die by the sword. And so there's a karmic aspect to the fact that he would die by gunfire, since he was such a proponent of any and everybody having a gun. Over here, with one whose head is buried in the sand, we have the tiger's eye. So this is saying that there were a lot of things that he pretended not to be aware of. So this could be talking about issues with his security. This could be talking about how disliked he may have been, but really it's saying that he pretended not to know things that could have prevented this occurrence. That could even be that maybe he was going too far with some of his rhetoric, maybe some of what he was espousing, because there are a lot of people that said that he didn't even necessarily believe a lot of the things that he said, that he was kind of a shock jock and positioning himself to get views and clicks and be influential. If that's the case, there were things that were probably revealed to him in spirit, if not, in the physical, like things that were revealed to him that he pretended not to see or know, and he definitely didn't take heed to. He had experienced a different kind of disappointment. Okay. And I think that this is probably talking post-mortem, because this is a spiritual autopsy that we're doing. I get the snowflake Jasper over brokenheartedness. I think he's disappointed. I think that he had plans. I think that there were things that he wanted to do with his platform and with his life. And obviously they were cut short. And so the echoes of his energy that remain, that I am now reading, is saying, that he's disappointed in what happened. Over the Egungun, I get the rose quartz. This is saying the ancestors love it. Okay, the ancestors love what is happening right now. They are not upset. They are not disappointed. They are happy with the turn of events, and I think that it doesn't take a rocket scientist to understand why that might be true. Over abuse, the abuse tile, if you can see that here, it's one person with their foot on another person's back. I have the danger stone. Listen, it's dangerous to abuse people. You back an animal, okay, into a corner, and they're going to come out fighting. What do you think a person is going to do? Okay. And so while we don't know, I don't know the story of this individual who committed this act. I don't know if he's responding to his own personal feelings, if for whatever reason he's tapped into public sentiment about Charlie Kirk, but abuse is definitely part of this recipe. And it could just be energetic. It could not be that there's a direct correlation. The person who committed this act was abused by him or felt, personally attacked. It could just be an energetic cocktail that led us to this moment, which is why we're here looking at this right now, right? He didn't worry about the things that he should have. Okay, so again, because I have fool's gold over worry. I also have the anchor upside down. This is a person in on their sick bed. So this is saying he wasn't sickened enough by the things that he was saying. He wasn't worried enough about the environment that he was contributing to. And so it came back to bite him. We all saw. Over interruption of destiny, I have the tiger's eye. And this is saying that he created this interruption of destiny. The interruption of destiny that he experienced, his life being cut short at 31 years old, was something that was created. It didn't have to be. Okay. But as we saw just moments ago, the karma surrounding this was he created debt. Okay. With the foul things that he espoused, the energy that he chose to push towards the further disenfranchisement of people who have already suffered enough, that created a debt for him. And he paid it with his life. Here I have, so we saw abuse over here. Here I have betrayal. And it's saying that he was betrayed. It wasn't something that he wanted, but it's something that happened. Now that gives credence to things that I've been hearing that I didn't really want to go into because I have not done enough of my own research. But there are people that were saying that I've even seen videos. I chose not to play those right here, but actually, why don't we go ahead and do that? Can we play the video, if we have it up, of the hand signaling. Do we have that? While we look for that, I'm going to tell you what I'm referring to. So there was a video that was released that showed just moments before he was shot. There were two different individuals who were standing around and beside him who appeared to be signaling. I mean, it's indisputable that they were doing some weird shit with their hands, okay? And people are saying that they were signaling to the gunman as if to say, now is the time, or this is the spot, or take your window, kind of a thing. So people are suggesting that he was betrayed, that he was betrayed, and I'm just going to leave it at that. And so this is saying that he did not want to be betrayed, meaning that he wanted he wanted and expected loyalty. He expected something other than what he got in this situation. So here we have water slipping through one's fingers. And I have a bone over that. And this is saying, you know, there were other things that he could have done with his life. There are other things that he could have done with his life and other things that he could have done with his platform. This bone is talking about ancestry. And it's saying that he let the legacy of his ancestors slip through his fingers. Now, I don't know his ancestors. The Bible says that you will know them by their fruit. And I can only imagine the stock that he actually came from based on what, you know, I saw, the clips that made it into my view. So I'm saying that to say that perhaps he didn't come from the best family in terms of morality and spiritual uprightness to believe the things that he believed and to say them out loud in public. No, that's not a fruit that upright people would want to have recognized. But whatever his family contributed to humanity, it appears that he let the blessings therein slip through his fingers. So maybe he could have chosen a different path. You know, maybe his ancestors did what they did in the time that they did it because it was acceptable. Maybe they didn't know any better. But he chose the path that he chose. And that was an interruption of destiny, that choice. We saw that just a moment ago. And so he let whatever legacy, whatever positivity, whatever blessings could have been included in the legacy of his ancestors. He let that slip through his fingers. He never meditated. Over meditation, I have the transformation stone and it's upside down. Had he meditated, and I'm not talking about, you know, sitting down and chanting. He could have done that too. It probably would have helped him. But he never really stopped to think about the impact that his speech was having. He never really stopped to think about that. And so that's how he got here. Had he really taken the time to understand how he was impacting people and who he was impacting, then things might have been different. So this timeline right here, this string of symbols is a lifetime, right? And it's carved up into 4 parts. And what I see here is actually very interesting because I have the skull right side up, which is talking about a death or a transition. And it is just after, it's really after the summer, right before the fall, which is exactly when this situation happened. So it's saying that sadly, his life ended just now when we know that it did, right between the summer and the fall. And so this is saying again that this was forecast because of his karmic debt. So it's almost as if this string of symbols is saying it was written. This was bound to happen, and it was meant to happen today. But those of you who practice Ifa should have the understanding that, you know, the 16 principles of Ifa tells us that the only parts of our lives that cannot be impacted by divination and sacrifice are the day we are born and the day we will die. So this was a non-negotiable. Now, was it sped up because of, his actions and things like that? Who are we to attempt to make that determination? But this string of sentences is saying, listen, this was ordained. If nothing else, it was ordained, right? It had to happen in this moment because of whatever reasons. And perhaps we'll learn a little bit more about this as we go on. He was afraid. So he may have pretended not to know what was going on with how hated he was, as was indicated over here. But right here with this fishbone over fear, he was afraid. And I don't know, I think maybe he was just kind of a scary type of dude, which is not hard to imagine. I mean, yeah. I don't know that his fear was based on any type of, guilt or understanding of the impact that he had. I think he may just have not been brave. Okay. And I think that is what is being revealed here. There were a lot of things that he was foolish about, and he chose not to change them, because before I touched the stone, it was upside down in a way that indicates to me that he chose not to transform the foolishness. And so therefore, he had vulnerabilities. His work cost him. You see here, we have the person on the treadmill and we have another quarter. This is saying that the work that he did was costly. In this case, it cost him his life. It also is an indication that there were things that he did in his work that were connected to money, right? So allowing himself to be used by right-wing parties, working as a shock jock, saying things that he may not have fully aligned with just for the purpose of increasing his platform or getting speaking engagements and those kinds of things that cost him the ultimate sacrifice. He didn't listen to his wife or the women in his life, okay? The earring over woman, I'm sorry. So he didn't listen. So I can totally imagine that, the women in his life, his mother, his wife, other concerned women may have tried to tell him, hey, you should cool it. Maybe you don't have to say it like that. Maybe you don't need to say so much of that kind of a thing. And he did not listen. He did not listen. He did pray. I get the fishbone over prayer, but I also get the safety pin. And so that's saying that he prayed for things that were fleeting. The safety pin is a temporary fix, right? The Bible says, store up your riches in Zion so they cannot rust or gather dust. Okay? Actually, I'm quoting Sizzler, who quoted the Bible, because Sizzler says, store up your riches in Zion so they cannot grow rust or dust like old iron. The Bible says, store up your riches in heaven. Okay, he did not do that. His prayers were for temporary blessings, things that in the end didn't benefit him. Okay, so he did pray, but he prayed. His prayers weren't well informed. He was enthralled in battles. And I think that these battles were of a personal nature. Y'all, what I'm seeing here, based on this board, I really do feel like he might have gone back and forth about some of the things that he was saying. I almost get the feeling that he was being used, that he was being betrayed, that he had that understanding. He did question his survival. This is the survival stone over questions. He did feel like he was in danger. He was afraid, but it did not influence him enough to bring about any change in his behavior or for him to exercise caution. So over caution, I have the penny. He was careless. You know, if you're going to talk that type of shit, you need to walk with a big stick, right? He did not do that because whatever security detail he had, they obviously failed him. And it looked like they were signaling to the gunman. So he could have been better informed about his energetic position. Okay. And it seems like he was a little bit oblivious to that. And that's what this battle is indicating, is that maybe he knew that he was involved in a battle, but I think that he kind of thought that he was in a better position than he was. And that is the reading for the moment. That's what I see right here. So we're going to come back and we're going to look at some other things after I have discussed a few other things that I wanted to share with you. So let's look at the astrology of the day. Let's see how something like this could have happened. And I'm just gonna get this out of the way. I don't like to talk over my bones. If you guys are liking this content, please give me some likes, some shares, and subscribe if you haven't already. This is a new format that I'm trying. And I will do this for other cases if it's something that you guys enjoy. Okay, so the murder happened on September 10th, 2025. Okay, and this was in the Eclipse corridor. All right, a pressure chamber of fate, you could say. On September 7th, there was a lunar eclipse in Pisces. On September 21, there will be a solar eclipse in Virgo. Okay, and so this murder happened in an eclipse corridor, which has some interesting energy. Between eclipses, time behaves strangely. Events that occur can often feel fated. They can feel larger than life, and they are impossible to avoid. So y'all remember when I showed on my board those string of tiles, and I said, you know, this is saying that it was written. That's exactly what I was saying. Things are impossible to avoid when they happen, and the energy is like it is. Lunar eclipses reveal hidden truths, emotional purges, and collective shadow eruptions, while solar eclipses demand radical resets, the cutting away of what no longer serves the collective. That's very important, you guys, because the solar eclipse would demand a radical reset, a cutting away of things that no longer serve the collective. So this is saying it's not just about him. Okay, this is the universe's utilitarian approach, the greatest good for the greatest number of people type situation. Okay, so if we have to pluck this one fool off the stage to save the collective, then that's the type of thing that's going to happen during an eclipse corridor. The corridor across Virgo and the Virgo and Pisces axis speaks directly to themes of control versus chaos, rationality versus faith, and analysis versus surrender. Okay, so there you have it. It's the universe self-correcting, as she does, right? And taking into account the greatest good for the greatest number of people. So if you have one person who is an agent of chaos at a time when, during the age of Aquarius, right? At a time when people, their knowledge is increasing greatly. And we know that the intention of any of us knowing anything, the intention of us, and when I say the intention, I mean the intention of our collective consciousness, God, right? The intention of God would be for us to learn, to understand things, for our awareness to increase for the benefit of one another. So if we have one fool on stage that's making that more difficult, that's hurting people, that's causing chaos, an agent of chaos, then it stands to reason that that would be corrected by the universe, right? Rationality versus faith. A lot of what we see coming out of the right wing is about God, you know. Trump, if y'all remember, even marched over, remember his last term, there was something going on and he carried a Bible and it was a total photo op situation. We know that people on the right will often thump the Bible. We know that they hide a myriad of, I'm just going to call it fuckery for lack of a better word, behind religious piety. They've been doing that, right? People were beat across their head with the Bible during slavery, and all kinds of wars and conflicts going all the way back to the Crusades have been fought, and atrocities been dealt in the name of religion. So self-correction, right? Cleansing, if you will. Within this corridor, Kirk's death reads not only as an isolated act of violence, but also as a karmic punctuation mark. And I mentioned that when I did my reading. So I had not done a reading on this before, but I'm so happy to see that it was absolutely in alignment with what the astrology had told me previously, because his death is a karmic punctuation. It had to happen. It was ordained based on any number of energetic truths. And here we have that it was unavoidable and that it was meant to punctuate a moment in time. And so this punctuation embodies the tension between a Virgoan critique, and a Piscean dissolution of chaos, okay? So let's talk about the numerology just a little bit. So again, it happened on September 9th, which was the 999 portal, okay? And this is a very intense closure point, symbolizing the end of a cycle. It marked a threshold where entire energetic structures would collapse, right? 9 being endings, things winding down, just is. The following day, September 10th, reduces to 1, which represents the birth of a new beginning. The numerological logic is that something must be destroyed or ended before the new cycle can emerge. The fact that he was murdered on 9/10 suggests that his death was marked as a ritualized ending for a collective narrative, clearing space for new political energies. Y'all, that was a whole mouthful, right? Because no matter how you look at it, if you believe that it was a conspiracy, right? And if you believe that that bullet may have come from his side of the fence, then it is still about clearing space. It's still about an ushering in of new energies. But if you believe that his murder was a cleansing or a call for atonement of some kind, then that holds true too. That's why, like I said at the beginning, it was ordained. It had to happen energetically, all of these different things converging. So his end fell exactly at a hinge point of dissolution and rebirth, right? The day after the 999 portal. Moon and Mars were in opposition on this day. So this is a violent flashpoint, okay? He was actually murdered at 12:23 p.m. Mountain Time. And at this moment, the moon opposed Mars. So the moon has to do with public emotion. It has to do with instinct, intuition, and Mars has to do with violence and weapons and assertion. Y'all, the poetic justice is just too much for me. Let me have a sip of my wine. So he was killed at a Mars moment, right? You do all this talking about guns and gun violence, and they pass you the mic and they say, hey, what do you think about violence? And the next word out of your mouth is, what do you mean, gangs? Okay. So it was a Mars moment. And opposition means direct conflict or collusion, collision. Well, there might be collusion is what they're saying, right? But what I meant to say about this moon and Mars opposition is that opposition means direct conflict. It means collision, and it means confrontation. He was shot minutes from this exact aspect. It was a moment that astrologers would flag as hypervolatile, dangerous, and conflict prone. Things like this are not accidental. You can't make them up, right? It was written. It was written in the stars. My board said it was written, and it's written in this report that I did before I ever threw these phones. Okay. So for his murder to happen at this moment is so interesting because the transit literally mapped, the transit itself predicts violence, okay? And those can be misunderstandings, they can be arguments, right? We know what Mars energy is all about, but it can absolutely be something physical. It can absolutely be, and it was in this instance. The moon in Aries is amplified raw impulse. Mars in Libra carried the shadow of projection, violence justified as balancing the scales. I said at the beginning, right, that it was a return to universal order, an attempt to balance and to fix things. So there's the balancing of scales, Mars in Libra. So through this violent act, we set things straight, is what the universe is saying. Okay. So from the morning until about 4 p.m., the moon was void of course. So that means it made no applying aspects before changing signs. Okay. Astrologers treat these hours as lawless zones where events lack grounding, outcomes are unpredictable, and actions spiral beyond control. Y'all, this was a heck of a window for this to happen. When I said it was ordained, the more and more you hear from this report, I believe a reasonable person would believe that. This shooting occurred during this void period, meaning the violence carried the signature of chaotic inevitability. No stabilizing forces were present, okay? And it's so interesting that the moon made not a single attempt during this time to perfect or interject any additional influence. And the reason I'm calling that out is because the moon is representative of feminine energy. And we learned here that he had offended the mothers greatly. So there's that. So symbolically, we could read this as a karmic act outside of human containment. And although the timeline itself opened, as though the timeline itself opened and swallowed the event. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about Jupiter's inflation of emotion. So earlier on the day that this murder occurred, the moon squared Jupiter. Jupiter amplifies, moralizes, and exaggerates. Okay, So are you getting a good feel for the energy that was at play during this event, right? So we have Jupiter amplifying things. So if public sentiment was already, he needs to shut up, he needs to get off the stage, he needs to be quiet, somebody shut him up, well, Jupiter amplified that. Jupiter brings with it morality, right? So it's going to moralize things. It's going to make sure that things align with what is right, okay? And it also exaggerates things. So things that are already happening, things that people may already be feeling or thinking. When tied to the moon, this creates emotional excess, ideological fervor, and crusading behavior, right? So this is the exact moment that somebody with a bone to pick, somebody who wants to be a martyr, somebody who wants to go down in history, this is a really great moment. This moment is going to feel good for them to do that thing that they've been thinking about doing, right? It's going to amplify what they have been dreaming about or imagining. It's going to make them feel morally supported. And it's going to exaggerate those things that have irked them and maybe bringing them to act. The shooter acting under this transit may have been fueled by exaggerated emotional conviction, believing that the act had higher purpose or moral weight, right? So this was some fanatical energy, in other words. In collective resonance, this aspect exaggerated the polarization of public reaction, immediate ideological battles around the meaning of his death. So what we're seeing, I just saw a video of this dude just completely crashing out moments after he heard about this. And, you know, it's not crazy for people to be upset when someone gets murdered. And he got murdered in public and it was gruesome. Okay. So it's not odd that someone would be upset, but I think that what Jupiter is going to contribute to this moment is an exaggeration. Okay. People are going to be real upset, right? People are going to be very hysterical. The conspiracy theories are going to grow and blossom and spread further and deeper than they would under normal conditions. So let's talk about Saturn retrograde in Pisces, okay? Saturn represents structure, authority, accountability, and institutions. And some would even say limitations. In Pisces, Saturn is weakened. Boundaries dissolve, order frays. In retrograde, it undermines authority figures directly. You heard what I said? Authority is undermined in this moment, right? Boundaries dissolve and order frays. It's a moment of chaos, period, okay? Kirk embodied the archetype of young authority, okay? So he was a young man on the same shit as those who had come before him. Quite disappointing, actually. And I'm sure a lot of people felt that. And his murder reflects Saturn's Piscean dismantling of that authority. It's authority that was not earned. We saw on the board that he was squandering the little blessings that lived in the legacy of his ancestors. He could have done something different, but he chose to do this. And as a young man with very little moral or spiritual authority, it did not work out for him. And so here we are doing this reading. This alignment was already hitting his natal. Okay, I'm going to talk about his chart in a minute, so I'm not going to go into that. So September 10th, 2025 was a day soaked in karmic tension. Remember, the eclipse corridor meant that that there was an inevitability aspect to what happened, and there were fated closures okay, that are predicted by an eclipse corridor. The Moon-Mars opposition predicts violence, period, okay? The void moon is about chaos without containment, okay? Saturn retrograde is about dismantling authority. And the numerology of that day is about a transition from endings to new beginnings. Okay, so I'm going to ask here if there is anything that we need to know in addition to the astrology of the day, right? I'm going to just use my cards and just pull just a few cards so we don't go too long. But I want to know if there's anything that would need to be perfected with regard to the astrology of the day. I'm going to show y'all the cards. Okay. So the first card, well, hold on, let me see if I'm getting a sentence here. All right. So the first card that I have here is the Seven of Spades, right? And so the Seven of Spades is just talking about questions. And I'm going to read it, I'm going to look at spades here as like swords. And I'm going to say, questions about weaponry, questions about danger, pondering, I just had another thought and I'm deciding if I want to say it or not. Basically, this Seven of Spades is talking about we have to look at the weapons that were used. And I think that that's very loaded because I think that the weapon that was actually used, right? I had heard about certain things being written on the bullet casings, okay? And that being a very great indication of why the shooter decided to do what he did. I think that might be included in the energy that this card is picking up on. But I also think that we need to look at the weapons that Kirk himself chose. What darts was he shooting out into the universe? And what were his weapons of choice? And so, yeah, that's that. And then the Nine of Clubs, we have an end to the work, right? An ending of the work. Okay, so we know that 999 energy spoke of endings, but this shooting happened on 9/10. So the endings turned into new beginnings. So I think this is saying that his work ended. He had done all that he could do, all that was needed for him to do. This may give a little fuel to conspiracy theories because, again, if we look at the weapons, if we question the weapon and it putting an end to his work, we may find something more there. And here we have the 8, which is karma, y'all. 8 is the number of karma. You turn it sideways, it looks like an infinity symbol. Okay, so we have the 8 of swords here, or the 8 of spades, and this is saying, just like my board did, karma. Okay, so we have to question the weapons that were used. It was the end of that nasty work that he was doing, and it was karma. Okay, so that is the astrology of the day. Now let's look at his personal astrology. So he was born on October 14th, 1993. Such a young man. And so he was a Libra sun sign. And this gave him a socially attuned identity. An identity that was oriented towards justice, relationships, and an affinity for rhetoric. Okay. So he was probably very comfortable doing what he was doing, very comfortable, espousing rhetoric, repeating things that he had been told, and speaking about fairness, which he often did. Okay. Libra sons often see the world as a big debate, balancing arguments, weighing scales, seeing truth through confrontation. In its shadow form, Libra can create enemies as foils for its identity. Kirk built his brand by polarizing, defining himself by what he opposed, right? And that never is a great position to take. I'm going to loosely quote Mother Teresa. You know, there's a story of that someone told about inviting her to an anti-war rally. And she said, "No, I'm not going to go. I'm not coming." And they said, "But why wouldn't you come? Of all people, you know, Mother Teresa, why wouldn't you come to the anti-war rally?" She said, "Because I don't want to be anti anything. Invite me to a pro-peace rally, right? Invite me to something that I can support, that I can stand up for." And I think that that's energetically a much better position to take. But our antagonist here, Mr. Kirk, did not do that. He built his brand by polarizing people, which is why that was dangerous. That was nasty work. Every time you get on stage, you're making somebody feel bad. Every time you say anything, it's pitting one group against another. That's not good. He defined himself by what he opposed. Psychologically, this sun placement shows a man whose sense of self was never autonomous. It was always relational. He only knew himself through conflict with the other. Y'all, that's so deep, because he was literally defined not by himself, not by these blessings that showed up on this board that could have come through his bloodline if only he had turned his head in a different direction. He chose not to be defined by that, by brilliance and genius and education and things that he had access to. That many of the people that he spat vitriol against did not. He had opportunity, he had access, and he chose to do this with it. Psychologically, this sun placement shows a man whose sense of self, oh, I said that already. I'm sorry, y'all. Psychologically, his sun placement shows a man whose sense of self was never autonomous, but always relational. So that's just important to remember. He only was able to recognize himself by looking at those that he opposed. That's a sad state for one's personal identity. It really is. He had a Mercury in Scorpio. So this is about mind and communication. Mercury in Scorpio cuts deep, penetrating, strategic, and exposing. This gave him a debating style that was unique to him. His ability to weaponize words and to see hidden motives. Okay, so that is why people often listen to him, because he had a very unique style. He had a very unique way of dealing with information and debating. And he would weaponize your words against you. If you've ever, and like I said, I was not a fan of his for sure, and I wasn't even exposed to that much of his content. But what I have looked at in preparation for this video tonight, I can see that he really has a way of weaponizing words, of twisting what people say to make them either feel or look silly or trip them up in their own argument. His rhetoric often carried the scorpionic shadow. His speech was designed to wound instead of enlighten, to dominate and to control. Remember, the cards just said, think about the weapons, question the weapons. What did he use? as his weapons, words. So what did the universe say? Let's get him off that stage. Let's take the mic, okay? Because those kind of words are difficult. I mean, those kind of weapons are difficult to police, right? Words, we all have them and we can all use them. The mind here is built for enemies and secrets, perfect for political warfare, but psychologically corrosive. Okay, so that's about his Mercury in Scorpio. So let's talk about his Venus in Scorpio. His Venus in Scorpio attracts extremes of loyalty and hatred. Y'all, that's exactly what we're looking at here. So just like that guy, that big old 50-year-old man that I saw crashing out over this boy's death, you have just as many people who couldn't stand him. You have the sniper who jumped from a building after shooting him. That video was crazy. That man jumped off of the roof of a building. Okay, this explains why Kirk drew both intense devotion from his followers and intense hostility. On a deeper level, Venus in Scorpio suggests unresolved ancestral trauma around intimacy, betrayal, and power struggles, patterns replayed in his public life as a stage of attraction and repulsion. Let's talk about his Mars in Virgo. So he had a Mars in Virgo, and this is connected to action and aggression. Mars in Virgo is relentless, it's precise and cutting. It fights with details, weaponizing logic and analysis, okay? This placement gave him his debater's aggression, attacking flaws, dissecting arguments, highlighting imperfection. In personal psychology, Mars in Virgo breeds restlessness, frustration, and anger when control is lost. His Mars aligned tightly with his South Node in Virgo, a karmic signature of someone doomed to repeat patterns of critique, attack, and hyperanalysis until disillusion. So what we see here, and I have a few other points from his individual astrology, but basically what we see here is a person who was a great debater, and he could have used his powers for good, but instead he used his words as weapons to hurt and to create distance between people instead of bringing them together. And I believe that what we saw in his murder is the karmic result of that. I want to talk a little bit about metaphysical law. Give me just one moment. If we could please take a few questions. If anybody has any questions or comments, Oshunka, maybe could you please read some of the comments? I don't want to get too far, or maybe I could do it. Let me see what y'all talking about. We can't hear you, Priestess.
All is one reflections at this time. If you have any questions, if you have any thoughts, anything that stirred your mind about the spiritual autopsy, go ahead and let us know in the comments right now. The things you thought that was popping, especially those readings, because Priestess just gave 2 different types of reading, a whole ass bone reading, and she pulled out them cards. her cards. So like we said, if this is something that you want to know more about, your first thoughts, just anything, let us know in the comments right now, because again, this is a community-based practice and we are here in community, so we want to let you we want to hear what's going on. So we're gonna play some comments as you guys bring them in, okay? Jordan said that he sold that soul, Ia. Sold that soul.
He definitely didn't do all that he could do.
And with his platform.
He did not do what he could have done, what he should have done with that platform. And it was like he chose to be as divisive as possible. It was just more of the same in his chart, just like more and more of the same, talking about
just simplified in different ways, really. Just different planets just taking over. The Swamp Siren said, I immediately thought it was interesting that it was the area of his throat chakra that was directly attacked.
Come on, sis. Come on. Yes, ma'am. Undeniably so.
Not only was it the way that it was done, but also the aspect in which his blood, his ashe streamed from his body. It was literally, to me, it was giving, like, you know how you pour one out for the homies doing libations?
It was
That's literally like what was coming. Straight directly to the earth.
It was pretty rough, you know. And I would hate for anyone to lose their life in that way.
Okay, Stormy said, no comment yet, but I just want to thank the both of you again for the wonderful readings. I'm working on getting all the materials for my altar. Oh, speaking of getting all the materials for your altar, this is a great time. If you are interested in any of the services that we have going on, specifically you saw Priestess just read out 2 different forms of divination. We have our divination mentorship starting soon within our community app. Also within our community app, when you first get started, we help you get and connect with your forced Orisa and with your ancestors. There are divinations to do that. You have support from myself, from the other senior priestesses, from my godchildren to help establish you. So at any point in time, if you need us, you can find us at learnorishahoodoo.com, as well as join orishahoodoo.com, so we can go ahead and get your journey started. So yes, I'm so glad to hear that you are getting your materials together. Like I said, if you need anything, you can find us.
Thank you, sis. So y'all, let's talk about metaphysical law a little bit, okay? We're going to talk about metaphysical law and a few other things. So the law of reciprocity, which is the law of cause and effect, essentially. In both Hoodoo and African spirituality, energy moves in circles. What is released into the world must also return. This is not a unique concept. It's one that exists in many different schools of thoughts, many religious and spiritual practices. If you've ever seen the snake eating its tail, that would be an example of this spiritual law, the law of reciprocity. Kirk's career centered on polarizing speech, cultural warfare, and legislation aimed at controlling women's choices. These actions placed him in an energetic debt. Eclipse season intensifies reciprocity. Timelines collapse. The distance between sowing and reaping shortens. A lifetime of sowing, restriction, and division can bring a sudden harvest of consequences. The law of sacred balance, or the law of balance, is also at work here. Balance is not optional. Balance is a governing principle. It has to happen. Yin and yang, for example. These things are universal law. You're going to see it over and over again from culture to culture, practice to practice. Kirk's alignment with restrictive laws around abortion and women's autonomy positioned him against balance itself, which recognizes women's choices and the creative power of women as untouchable. Okay, so remember at the beginning, when I first did the reading with the bones, I said the mothers are not lightweight. The energy of the mothers is very heavy in this scenario. And those are some of the reasons why. The law of ancestral witness. Now that theme has been running in the background. I'm going to tell you why. Because the ancestors are ever-present judges. They hear cries of injustice that human courts might ignore, that human reporters might ignore, that people who are just passing or flipping through TikTok might ignore. But the ancestors, they hear it all, okay? In traditions across Africa and the diaspora, when women's voices are disregarded, ancestral law will answer. If you guys practice, y'all know that my practice is Ifa. And in Ifa, there is a aspect of the Ifa corpus, Irosun, which has to do with women issues. Irosun itself actually means menstrual blood, okay? And so that understanding of how important women are, how important atrocities against women might ripple through one's destiny, that's built into such ancestral and indigenous practices, okay? And so if you build a platform on offending women, or you have, maybe that wasn't his intention to build his platform on offending women, but you couldn't care less, you don't care enough to stop, you are offending nature itself. And so September 10th, 2025 is the day of reckoning. Okay. His violent end echoes the principle of ancestral witness. It signals that the ancestors and unseen forces do not allow dishonor and persist indefinitely without correction. So those of you who practice Orisa Hoodoo and who know anything about it and who are followers of my content know I love me some Bible. Thank you. And so I'm going to give you a few Bible verses to think about. In Hoodoo, we use our Bible. So let's look at some verses today. Let's look at Galatians chapter 6, verse 7. Whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. Kirk sowed seeds of division and restriction. His death illustrates a violent reaping of the same energy. And I think that just speaks for itself. You will reap what you sow. You know, you live by the sword, die by the sword. You know, you can't talk about gun violence. And, you know, I think it's great for everybody to have a gun. And be shocked when a gun comes and visits you at your neck.
Yeah, to that, I don't know if you saw this comment, because those are so on brand.
Exactly. That's what I said at the beginning. Like, he literally, moments before he was shot, was about to say some shit about disparaging to African Americans. I just know it. You know, he started off, what do you mean? Gang violence? Okay, Isaiah chapter 10, verses 1 and 2. Woe unto them that decree unrighteous decrees, to turn aside the needy from judgment. So, applied to abortion bans and similar legislation, this verse highlights the injustice of laws that strip away the rights of vulnerable groups. Okay. Woe unto them who decree unrighteous decrees. So, because you have the access, because you have the gall to manipulate laws and change people's fate and lives, doesn't mean that you should do it. And when you do that and you disadvantage people who are already disadvantaged, you're going to have to answer for that. And that's what has happened. Matthew chapter 26, verse 52 says, all they that take the sword shall perish with the sword. Okay. The sword is the tongue sharpened as a blade, the policy written to cut down rights. Kirk lived by the sword of rhetoric, and he met his death by the literal weapon. Okay. Let's look at Proverbs 31, 8 and 9. Open thy mouth for the dumb. Plead the case of the poor and needy. Instead of advocating for the voiceless, his politics often amplified the privileged. This verse reflects the missed biblical mandate. He's been critical of DEI programs and has made remarks about Black professionals, pilots in particular. This suggests skepticism about qualifications. If I see a Black pilot, I'm going to be like, boy, I hope he's qualified. Y'all saw that video where he said that? So, you know, you open your mouth when you have a platform. And again, you have access and you have the opportunity. You have some type of ancestral ashe that they were showing us on that board when I first started doing the reading. And you chose to use all of those things to restrict people, to shrink people, and to attempt to remix history so that people who have already been disproportionately siphoning off of the blood, the sweat, the tears, and the resources of Black and brown people all over the world so they can continue that foolishness. That's what you use your platform for. And now here we are. So I talked a little bit about Orisa a moment ago, and I'm going to go back into it because I want to talk about Orisa and Ifa cosmology as it might relate to this case. Now, obviously, I'm not going to do a consultation. I'm not going to do a reading about this case using any of the Ifa divination systems. But what I am going to do is talk about things that are present in the practice and in the corpus, because there are things for us to think about. We can always learn, you know, from the experience of others. You know, a word to the wise should be sufficient. So I mentioned earlier about Orisa, which this portion of the corpus talks a lot about ancestral law. It is also, as I said before, connected to menstrual blood. Orisa addresses the power of women and the consequences of ignoring and mistreating women. The Iyami, or the mothers, are active in this portion of the corpus. How does this connect? Well, abortion restrictions and attempts to legislate women's bodies are direct violations of women. Something that women would absolutely be concerned with, and the mothers would absolutely be concerned with this. Okay. Osa is another part of the corpus, which has to do with sudden upheaval and correction. And Osa is tied to disruption. It is tied to betrayal and the collapse of leaders who fail to honor balance. Okay, so the sudden murder of Kirk underlines Osa's theme, some of the themes of Osa. When imbalance is embodied by one figure, reversal comes dramatically. Okay. The primordial mothers, often called Iyami, often called the witches, the primordial mothers have a big place in the practice of Ifa. They govern justice. They are connected to, they are known to menace those who menace women, those who disrespect and dishonor women. Men who attempt to legislate women's bodies place themselves in the direct line of fire, if you will, for the of my
At this time, this is a reminder that if you are not already a member of our community, you can join. The link is scrolling at the bottom of the screen. It's also within the comments. If there are some things that priestess is bringing up that sounds interesting and you want to know more about, you don't have to Google. There are literally so many other priestesses on staff that are working with our priestesses in training to articulate this information in a practical and digestible way, just how you see us doing here tonight. So if there is any interest in any aspect at all, be sure to join our community, okay? Back.
Ocean community. Did my sound go out?
Yes, it did.
What was the last thing you heard me say?
It went out like a minute ago. The last thing I heard you say was yelling at Deja.
Before that.
Before that, you were talking about the aspects of Iyami. Give me 1 second. I'm going to my notes. About their presence of not really, how really it's basically taboo to dishonor women, specifically those that are elders.
Okay, so it wasn't too bad. All right. Yeah. Okay, thank you. So sorry about that, y'all. So Iyami governs justice for women. And if you dishonor women, you dishonor Iyami. If you remember when I first did my bone throw, I mentioned that the mothers were not lightweight, that the mother's energy ran heavy through this scenario. And so the Iyami, the primordial mothers, are concerned with this case. So for those of you who practice Hoodoo, you may recognize that there is some serious crossroads energy here. For such a young person, so full of promise, you know, in terms of the platform that he built and his ability to gather followers and listeners, you know, but he made a choice, and that was also indicated in the reading. The violent or unexpected his violent and unexpected death can be understood as a crossroad event, a moment where personal choice intersects with ancestral enforcement. Okay. And we talked about in the beginning when I started the reading, we talked about how there was a cleansing aspect, things being set back right. So that is a crossroad energy, because he could have gone this way or he could have gone that way. And the road that he chose led him to this spot that we're in right now. His death represents the culmination of his choices meeting the demands of cosmic justice, right? I'm sure some of y'all have heard the saying, don't let your mouth write a check that your ass can't cash. Okay. So metaphysical law teaches that imbalance attracts correction and that debts cannot be avoided, spiritual debts. The Bible warns that unjust laws and weaponized rhetoric return to the one who issues them. Ifa and Orisa Hoodoo doctrine reminds us that to offend Iyami is to invite sudden downfall. This event, seen through all of these lenses, reads not just as political violence, but as a ritual moment where cosmic law is rebalanced and distorted by years of division and restriction. Okay? So, I'm sorry, where cosmic law rebalanced a field distorted by years of division and restriction. So I'm going to do one more reading. Y'all know my style. I like to find out what is it that we should individually and collectively take from this occurrence. Okay? So I'm going to throw my bone. What do we individually and collectively need to know? What's the takeaway for us? Okay. So the first thing that catches my eye is listen. Got the earring over the clock. Now is the time to listen, right? So we need to pay attention. This doesn't mean to just listen to what I'm saying right now or just listen to the commentary about what has happened in this case, but we really need to listen to the energy at play here. We need to listen to our intuition. We need to listen to karmic law being demonstrated and modeled for us. We need to listen to spirit in this moment, right? There's a lesson here for us all, something for us all to take away. To the side of the baby, I have the student stone. You need to talk to your kids about things like this. Talk to your children about how words have power. Talk to your children about how, there will be a reckoning for all things that you do. Everybody makes mistakes, right? None of us are perfect, but you want the things that you do that you may have to answer for to not be so diabolical that you end up on a stretcher, that you end up being gunned down on a national stage. Okay? Talk to your children about the importance of being upright. Okay? I get the fishbone over the past. Listen, don't forget, right? Remember the past. Remember what happened to your ancestors. Remember what happened in this very moment to this man who intended to reverse women's suffrage and civil rights and a whole bunch of other stuff, right? He single-handedly wanted to take us back, 60 years. Don't forget the past. Don't forget where we came from, what people have fought for, okay? Create precision, right? Be precise. Understand what you're doing. The Bible says, in all you're getting, get ye first understanding. Let's do that. Let's understand where we are and what we need to do about it. Okay. Do not be, and I'm not even looking at the board. This is me talking, adding on to this. Do not be coerced into believing that things are so different that you don't have to watch the news. I mean, I don't sit in front of CNN either, but I pay attention to things that happen. You need to know what's going on. Don't let yourself believe that none of it matters and that you can't have any impact. Don't be at the mercy of things occurring like this, okay? Over Oshun, or my tile that is connected to Oshun, rather. It alerts me to areas of life that Oshun deals with, like cleansing and purification. I have carnelian over that. And that indicates to me that there's something very royal about Black women. There's something very significant about Black women. And when they were offended in this instance, the retribution was certain. Okay, it was absolutely written that he would have to answer for that. So I guess what I really want to say here is that there was an offense to the African feminine. That's what I want to say. Okay. Look at this, y'all. Over the clown, and you see the person with their pockets turned out, I have the battery. If you remain foolish, then you're going to remain in poverty, right? Foolishness leads to poverty. Okay. They're one and the same, I guess, right? So if you want things to get better, you got to be precise. If you want your pockets to improve, you need to be precise. You need to remember situations like this. It's talking about our collective situation. So if we continue to be foolish, if we continue to be like, oh, that stuff don't happen anymore, that was back in the day, right? Then we're going to continue to be disenfranchised. We're going to continue to be disadvantaged. So the ancestors say, listen, remember the past. Don't bury it. Remember it, so that you can make decisions going forward where you act in precision to prevent continued poverty and disadvantage for you and those people that you love. Pray. Get obsidian over prayer hands. You need to pray. That should not come as a surprise. The ancestors are always going to leave us with a message about needing to pray. A lot of stuff off the board here. I get the survival stone over the third eye. So they're saying we're going to be all right. We're going to be all right in spite of this event, right? We're going to be okay. And I don't think that we doubted that. This is interesting right here. So over the dream, I have the big piece of the wishbone, okay? And over the man, I have this stone that's connected to transformation. And so what this is saying is that these men, they're going to have to change their dream, right? What these old white men who have been the perpetuators of white supremacy and difficulty for really the world, but definitely, Black and brown people in the U.S., their dream is going to have to change. Their dream is going to have to be more inclusive. They can strike down DEI all they want to, and they can go to national stages with all of their rhetoric and ignorance. But creation has already spoken. And this case today is demonstrative of that. Okay. I get, you see these 2 quarters over caution. This is saying, y'all, that we need to be careful of our money. And I know what this is talking about. I know what this is talking about because it's talking about the power of our dollars, the power of our money, and to be careful with how we spend it. It's talking about us being able to be impactful using our pocketbooks, y'all. It's talking about us being able to change the way we are treated and the way that we are viewed when we are careful with our money, when we're not spending frivolously. Okay. So as a result of this, we should understand that we need to be careful with our money. We need to be precise, as I said earlier. Okay. We need to not forget the past. And we need to be peaceful. Okay. So over the dove here, I have the anchor. We need to be peaceful. We don't need to be out marching about anything, right? We don't need to be involving ourselves in rallies connected with this, certainly, but probably not much else, in this moment. We need to just sit back and organize, right? We need to organize our minds, organize our houses, organize our communities, our temples, our churches, our covens, etc. Okay. And we need to love the women in our lives and in our bloodlines. Okay. We see here that because women were disrespected, it led us to this moment. What do we need to know going forward over the woman? Y'all see all this stuff. Look, we got to be locked in. The hand that rocks the cradle rules the world. We need to love her, as that heart is saying. And the open cowrie shell is saying, yeah, I'm talking about the woman. Okay. We need to be very much aligned with Black women. We need to be very much aligned with Black women in this moment and in the aftermath of this scenario. We got the bone over the bullseye. So this was ancestral. The target was hit. Okay. Enough said. Over the blindfold, y'all. Danger stone. Don't be fooled. Do not be fooled. All right. The battle has not been won. One little dude getting picked off the stage does not constitute the winning of a war. Okay. So stay woke, as they say. Okay, and everything else that I have on the board just kind of is a repeat of what I've been saying. So that is the reading. Does anybody have any questions, comments, or concerns? Okay, Jordan says, in the wake of the media, people think so much about the weight of how they can impact others and a narrative, but rarely of the weight of how it can and will impact their own lives, energy, and karma. That's true. Especially when everybody is or wants to be an influencer. We're so concerned about how we can impact other people and how we can influence other people and make them move in a certain way or think a certain way or buy a certain thing. But you're going to pay for all that. You better be moving people in the right direction. Something that aligns with their greatest good. Okay, because the way they try to spin it, yeah, we didn't have anything to do with this, but they know that, This was not a crime committed by any Black or brown person. We didn't do this. I mean, we not broke up about it, but we definitely didn't have anything to do with it. So what do y'all think? Do y'all think that this was, that there is a conspiracy at work here? Anybody? Berserker Magica said the fact that he also spent so much money and intention on shaping the youth with his movement. Absolutely. Putting programs in schools and colleges, he definitely needed to be stopped. Yes, because he was targeting the babies with this foolishness. He was targeting the youth, intending to change history forever. So, yeah, he had to be stopped. But you know, Iyami don't play about women and children. They don't play. There's always a conspiracy at work. Oh, Jordan, you might not be wrong, though. I think this was bound to happen, and sadly, we will see more of it. Well, more of what exactly? What do you mean exactly? More gun violence? I mean, sadly, for sure, that's going to continue. But do you think? Are you saying that more right wing people who spew right wing rhetoric are going to be dealt with? That was a tongue twister. Do you think that more of those people are going to be dealt with? What exactly do you mean? Not to mention this happened the same day as a school shooting. I mean, the gun violence, is a thing. It needs to be dealt with. But I couldn't even begin to tell you what needs to happen. That is not my area of expertise, but it does seem like guns are too easy to get. And people do not know what to do with them. They're meant for protection, not offensive acts of foolishness, even if you don't agree with a person in their work. I think that he also got way too big for his britches within his own camps. Well, I don't know enough about who he was, or how he was, within his microcosm. But I know that he was a disease to America. I'm more concerned about them trying to find any little way to come for our community, or at least rage bait us. Every Black person needs a powerful priestess on the line from here on out. Oh, that's been the case. That has been the case, Yep, we definitely, what the old folks say, stay prayed up. I'm honestly wondering about the right wing and how things are going to be handled energetically with the time we are in. I don't know, because I often wonder if those people believe in God. I wonder if they believe in God. I know that they claim to be religious and they've erected universities and they tote the Bible and they thump it. But do they believe in God, parentheses, ESS? Okay. Do they understand that there will be a reckoning, and you can't attempt to put your foot on the neck of the mother of civilization and think that everything is gonna work out for you. And remember, well, that's for another time. It was on the 10th of the month. Yeah, that's some strong energy for sure. But we talked about that. I think their true intentions are wicked and hidden behind Christianity. Absolutely. Absolutely. Just the further weaponization of Christianity. But we're not going to fall for it. This return to African spiritual traditions that we're experiencing is a wake-up call. We have to wake up. We can't continue to be rocked to sleep by people who do not have our best interests at heart, and paint God to look like them, so that you won't think that God even resides within you or lives anywhere close to you. Okay. He tied his ego to such a large and diabolical group of politicians at such a young age. Yeah. He started, oh my God, he started that at 18. The corrupt youth corrupting the youth is becoming easier and easier. Technology is making that easier. Mm-hmm. And that is a scary aspect of technology, especially because children tend to have a much better handle on it, let's be honest, than a lot of adults. You got to stay vigilant, y'all. And you remember on this last throw, it said, teach your children. I got the student stone over the children. That can also mean study your children too, right? It can also mean that you need to pay attention to what your children are consuming, who they are watching, and what they are listening to. We have a responsibility to do that, to keep our children safe and to prevent, monsters from cropping up out of our homes. Well, you guys, I really appreciate you being with me today for this reading. I was excited to try out this new format. I hate that, this tragedy was the catalyst for me to do it, but here we are, okay? It's a crossroads moment. A decision was made. I love y'all deep like the river. And I thank you for joining me tonight. If you would like to find out more about our community, the link to join us is going to be in the notes section or the description section of this video. Priestess, is there a way that we can put the link somewhere on here?
Yes. So the links is in the description and it's in the chat. I will post it again. Within the description, you can also find ways to book Reverend Priestess Oshun Funke Iyanifa for divination readings. You may also purchase her book, Get Your Life, so you can get right every single month of the year. And we also have opportunities for mentorship as well. If this divination service, if this metaphysical autopsy, if this time with community has blessed your spirit in any way, shape, or form, please like, comment, share this video with others. Also, don't forget, she's been talking about spiritual law all damn night. Law of compensation, equal energy exchange. This was a free reading. She did 2. She did 3. Okay. One of them was bones. That's a lie. David Divine. That's the cash tag. All right. Like I said, anything else that can be found will be in the description below. And if you like this, like I said, share it. Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Let us know your thoughts on the app, on Facebook, wherever we are active, which is everywhere. Tag us so we can do this again.
And if you haven't already, get my book, Get Your Life, a month-by-month guide to spiritual alignment. I'm actually going to be teaching from this book tomorrow around 1 o'clock. You do have to be a member of our community to get the link to the class, and it is an absolutely free class, okay? This book is available. It's on Kindle, and you can buy it in print, paperback, and hardback, okay? And so we teach every month from this book.
All right. We want to thank you for being in here, community, with us. Io, is there anything else you want to say before we close out?
No, I'm so grateful for all of you guys. Be precise, be careful, be vigilant. Thank you.
Oh, wait, look what Anansi said. All her comments just started buzzing in.
Public flogging. He started a nonprofit and was aiming for a movement. Public flogging was a practice he suggested to bring back, and it was brought back on him on a high energy day. Yep. Yes, it was. That was crazy. That's crazy. Public flogging. He should have been flogged as a child.
All right. So we're thank you. Thank you to the members in the community that are showing their support in the comments. Thank you guys for the love donations, dropping the honey pot so you know they're with us in the general ashe of the night. We love you all. Yeah, you want to sign out, Mama?
Like I said, I love y'all.
You got to say it again. Do the outro again.
Okay. I am Priestess Oshun Funke. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I love y'all deep like the river.